Welcome to Good Afternoon here on Metro Television, and I'll tell you today is going to get very interesting based on a discussion that has to do with UTAG, who is still on strike, and impasse with the Labour Commission as to what is the base of agreement to concerning the educational system. So we'll be going on this conversation going forward, how this strike began and what are the demands by UTAG, and going straight to see its implication on the educational system, where already 15 members who belong to the UTAG have really laid down their tools, and this implication will certainly affect students who are on campus. We'll be discussing these and more after this break, and my name indeed is Winston. Tackie, stay tuned for more. Welcome back to Good Afternoon Ghana here on Metro TV. If you're watching us, we're live on Facebook and also on our Twitter handle at metrotvgh.com. You can tweet at us on this discussion going forward. It has to do with the strike and also the disagreement between UTAG and also the Labour Commission as to how long this is going to be. We're still going to be following up to bring you an update on that. We heard yesterday that they were in a meeting where agreement couldn't really settle on the way forward until the case has been postponed to the 15th. And we are looking forward to hear the feedbacks from both stakeholders in the educational system. But I would like to take you through how long this situation has been, beginning from the 10th of January, bringing you down on what the discussions have been. So as you can see shortly on your screen, the reasons for UTAG's industrial action. First of all, University Teachers Association of Ghana laid down their working tools due to government failure to address what they describe as worrying conditions of service of lecturers. According to the association, government has breached the timelines agreed for resolution reached last year. UTAG warns government to reconsider the payment of its annual research allowance to a more realistic allowance. They also want members of the 2013 Interim Market Premium IMP of, let's say, of 104% of basic salary in their interim salary restored. So these are some of the demands that they have laid before the Labour Commission, and they insistently want it to be hit on. On the January 10th, that's the trajectory of the strike. January 10th, UTAG began this strike, and also we realized on 13th of January, the National Labour Commission meeting government and the national executive member of UTAG to resolve the impasse between their demands based on what they have really been requesting. On the 14th of January, government assures UTAG that the strike was settling end. And that was after we saw Professor Jampo consistently coming to speak to the media about what they believe have been unfair demands and how the government has been treating them. And so initially they withdrew from the meeting earlier held on within the week, but we believe going forward we will hear a more realistic outcome from their meeting. On the 27th of January, they said, we are ready to be jailed and forfeit our salaries for better conditions of service. That was how bad the situation was. That was when the tension was brewing between those two factions. On January 28th, Graduate Students Association of Ghana, GRASAC, called for the government to resolve the concerns of UTAG because they happen to be those losing out over this whole strike situation. On the February 3rd, we saw that Accra High Court directed the National Labour Commission and UTAG to consider an out-of-court settlement and return on February 10, 2022, to hear their situation or what they have really concluded on from both demands going forward. The UTAG declined the invitation to meet with National Labour Commission despite court order. That was on the 4th. And same 4th, Education Minister met with Vice Chancellors Ghana over UTAG strike. So we'll be speaking to some really concerned individuals or experts to understand the reality of how the situation has been. We'll be also speaking to students, that is the Emmanuel Boachi-Yadom, the president of NUCS, to hear from the students' perspective with regards to the strike. But as of now, we have joining us on Zoom the party, that is the Kofi Asare, Executive Director of African Watch, to really care for me. Good afternoon, sir, and welcome to Good Afternoon, Ghana.
All right, Kofi Asar is not represented. A fellow at Africa Education or Divine, where is represented.
Okay, actually, so help us understand, what do you make of the state of the discussion between UTAG and NLC going forward?
Viewers and to senior brother Peter, good afternoon to you as well. We believe strongly that negotiation is what it would take to resolve this particular matter. It will not need a court action. What we're seeing yesterday, in the wisdom of the court, they could have directed, as they directed last year, when UTAG was on strike. They directed the teachers or the lecturers to go back to the lecture hall. But this time around, they asked them to go back, and then negotiation continues. That is what exactly that is needed. Over the past 5 weeks, what we've seen more is about appealing to the teacher unions to go back to the lecture hall. And it's not going to take appeal, it is going to take negotiation. And that is what we need to get to. And we're just happy about that this time around, the court has not directed that UTAG go back to the classroom or lecture hall while this negotiation is ongoing, because UTAG would have learned their lesson when last year the vice president intervened and they listened to the vice president. But what do we see? It appears there has been a bad faith on one side, where the demand of that one side, which is UTAG, has not been met. So they may have been living on precedent that, well, last year we didn't see any action, even though we listened to pleas and went to the lecture hall. This time around, they are not ready to budge and go back to the lecture hall. And that is why it's very important to see NLC committed to more of negotiation than to using the court to compel lecturers to go back to the lecture hall.
All right. So before we move on, kindly let us know. You say you're representing Kofi Asare. Can we get your name first before?
Divine Kwe.
Divine Kweku. Great.
Divine Kwe.
Yeah. Great. So now that the issue is out of court and the standby Labor Commission, you said, going through the court process wasn't the appropriate procedure. So what do you think is the appropriate procedure, and how best can this issue be resolved without any further complication based on the demands being made by UTAG?
All right. Yes, as mentioned, court is not an option. And what would have done, so far you've seen that for UTAG, they've made a proposition. They have come out with a quotation or demand. What is left is to see government also coming out with its own proposition. That's where the negotiation starts from. But so far it appears more that
okay. So we also asked we apologize for that, and we will get back to that particular conversation again and I'll build up from there. Interestingly, the educational minister intervened in this particular conversation, and I think we have Divine back on the line. Hello, Divine.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please. So go ahead, you are making a point.
All right, so I was saying that right now, as you see, for UTAG, they are making a proposition. They have sent in a proposal for consideration. If government has a counter, that is fine. Government should come out with its own counter proposition. That would have helped. That would bring sort of the negotiation process starting. But right now, where government has so far not made a proposition, and it only appears that UTAG is the only ones solely sticking to what they want or their demand, that is the case. Government also needs to come out with, this is what we have, and looking at the condition, where can we meet each other halfway? That is what needs to be done at this point. So we need not to use the court at this point at all. Where we have seen that, okay, probably we heard that for labor unions, they need not to be on strike before negotiation continues. I believe we will have to look at exception to this, because if you look at it, last year, this same thing, they said don't be on strike and then continue negotiation. That was considered, and then also the UTAG was compelled by law to go back, and nothing came out of that.
Okay, so let me come in. Are you proposing that our labor law does not, in a way, does not really reflect how we're supposed to handle our labor dispute. Because if that is the case, right now the consumers, possibly the students who are now losing out on teaching time and lecture hours happen to be spending more on campus, and a lot of facilities on campus are being paid, especially, let's say, utility services like electricity and all are being spent on, and definitely government is going to pay for those costs. In that instance, where do we factor the demands of students in this conversation?
All right, yes, we need to consider the demands of students because they are the one that is actually feeling the brunt of this whole issue. But you see, it appears more that successive governments, not only this government, has not paid heed to demand of UTAG. This issue is not today's issue. It started way back, and we're talking about something that was nestling us at the time of 2008. And then we have all traveled up to this point in time. So if commitment was to be there, I'm not sure would have been here. So clearly, anybody who would have followed trends of this particular issue can come to the conclusion that yes, indeed, government has not shown enough commitment, and they don't see.
Okay. All right. We'll certainly be speaking with the IFEST, that is the Executive Director of IFEST, to get us more on this particular development, because there are many issues propping up of this UTAG strike. If you are a student anywhere watching us across the country, you can send us what you make of this conversation, and also send us through the WhatsApp line, and also through our Twitter handle at Metro TV GH on Twitter. Facebook is showing live. Also, let's hear what you say. We'll read it live here on the show and make you know how far or what is really entails based on the demands being made by UTAG. Education is critically necessary for national development. We've seen investment being made by government. The Educational Ministry also have prioritized the TVET system and structures. There's been reforms, and certainly we're looking to see a better Ghana through a proper educational sector development. But with this strike, its implication and all the necessary updates is what we intend to open going forward. But I think we still have Mr. Akbelo on to still speak to us to the regard. Okay, that's Mr. Peter. Yeah, Mr. Peter is Executive Director of IFEST. Good afternoon, Mr. Peter. Thank you for joining. Good afternoon, Ghana. Hello, Mr. Peter.
Good afternoon.
Great.
Good afternoon.
All right. Let me throw a similar question to you. The instance of this particular strike is what we've been talking on for some time now. Now, the demand, there's the call for the university to be shut down because of the long-lasting, which has taken over 3 weeks now, of this particular strike. What do you make of this situation so far?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to your viewers. It's unfortunate that we have to get to this stage. It's unfortunate that those we have given the authority to manage our education have brought us to this particular state. Of course, it's been a long while we had such an experience, and ideally, the common sense position is that when universities are academically inactive for a period of time, they close down. I know that is stated clearly in the UCC statutes, and that of Legon, Tech, and others are not that explicit. But for UCC, after 21 days, it is stated clearly that the university can be closed down, and that is why others, stakeholders are calling for that to happen. Others also feel that it is only when the universities are closed down that government will feel that this is really getting out of hand, because then it will be part of the records of the government that it was during their tenure that universities were closed down.
All right. Peter, initially we've seen, over the years, we've seen demands from the government by labor consistently being a give or take. If you don't give me this, you're also not going to get that. How do we resolve this particular challenge in our labor front? Right now, we are in the case of UTAG going forward.
For UTAG, I have said several on other platforms that it is self-inflicted. We shouldn't have gotten to this particular state, because this started somewhere around August, September last year. And as Divine said, they called the strike off because of the intervention of the vice president. Now, if that was what was done, and we have people managing our education, and they knew that if they do not attend to the needs of UTAG on time, there was a high possibility that UTAG will go back on strike. They sat aloof, they didn't pay much attention to it. It seems that they do not care. It seems that they are not attaching some level of seriousness to this issue. And that is clear by the utterances of some of officials in government. And even when the Minister of Education got opportunity to address the nation on the current state of our education, he did a press conference at the Ministry of Information. He did not mention this issue. First years have been in school for almost 3 weeks, and we were thinking that an update on education should cover at least what is really happening in the tertiary institutions, I mean the universities, and the steps that have been taken to address that. He didn't mention it. When a journalist asked the question, he did not answer. It was a second prompt that made him say that, we are working on it and we are trying to resolve it. And that is over a week now. So for us, we think that the government have not shown enough commitment. The government have not shown enough seriousness towards this issue. And until government shows that kind of commitment and seriousness and respect for the university lecturers, we are not going to have an end to this particular challenge, unfortunately.
All right. In as much as the demands by the UTAG structure sounds legitimate, sometimes the core is that what are the lecturers also giving out to the student? Have the student been asked in regards to what they also benefit? Is that a good call from that angle?
I don't think this is the time to talk about the output of lectures. Of course, we know the contribution of the universities to the development of the country. I don't think anybody would want to question the contribution of lecturers to the economic growth of this country. I don't think we would want to go into such a conversation in terms of the contribution of lecturers to the human capital development of this country. I don't think that is what we would want to do now. The fact remains that the lecturers have a good case. From my perspective, the fact remains that those who have the
But in as much as the issue keeps dragging, we really want to open up to see, to let viewers understand what is really keeping the tables still not shaking. Peter.
Yes, I'm saying that the point is that there's a demand on table. The proposals have been made by UTAG. There should be a counter proposal from government, and that is what we are not having. So if there is a counter proposal from government, then you can talk about compromise that Divine is even talking about.
So what form should this proposal be, Mr. Peter? What form should it take for it to sound reasonably and readily acceptable by UTAG?
Well, but I can't say for sure. I can't even talk for government. I don't know what government has in its sleeves. I think that they know the demands from UTAG. I think that they have competent people to sit down, analyze the demand for UTAG, and see where government can help or fit in and what government cannot offer, and then make a counter proposal. That is when you can talk about negotiations. That is when you can talk about compromise. But as it stands now, and from the grapevine, there's not been any counter proposal from the government. It is UTAG's proposition, and then the National Labour Commission's desire to ensure that UTAG goes back to classroom. Government have not made any proposals, and even if they have made, they have not been able to reach a compromise, and that is what the problem is. So if the managers of education, if government thinks that the contribution of UTAG is so enormous to the development of this country, I think by this time, they would have found solution to this. And let me make this point. It is not always about money. I think that the way UTAG have been treated from the beginning seems that they have not been given the needed respect and recognition that they deserve. And that is also one of the reasons why we are where we are now. Because there have been negotiations where people who represented government had no authority to take decisions on behalf of government. So that at the end of the day, whatever decision that was reached had to be approved by a higher authority. And that brings us back to square one. These issues should resolve without any further.
All right. Interestingly, you made call the fact that when the vice president spoke to UTAG, they returned back to their work post, and the debate came down where the demands and everything. Students were back to classes. We saw examination going on smoothly and all that. Now that they've offered, the conversation is still going on with regards to the demands for UTAG. What do you make of constant promises by, let's say, government or key stakeholders of this nation in regards to labor dispute, instead of initially beginning with what they've just begun so far, with sitting at the table and negotiating? And also, let me just add, the view by UTAG, or the stance by UTAG, where they made a statement on January 27 that we are ready to be jailed and forfeit our salaries for better conditions of service. What do you make of this posture and intervention by key personalities in this country?
The Vice President's intervention was effective. That's why the strike was called off last year. I was thinking that the Office of the Vice President would have followed through and ensure that whatever promises that were made or concessions that were made by the university teachers would have been met. I don't know how far the Office of the Vice President went with this. So the UTAG would have to go back and to whatever they said they would do. For UTAG, for members of the university community, talking about they would have to, even if they need to be jailed, I think these are comments that people make when they are pushed to the wall, because there have been calls from other sectors that the members of the university community, teachers in the university should lose their monthly salaries and other things. So I think these are response to those calls that have been made by other people. But the posture of government, and I'll keep saying that because government holds the key to solving this issue. The posture of government is not helping with this. I think that there's not enough pressure on government, and they seem not to realize the effect of their position on the student body, on the university education and other things. I think that a government that seeks to increase tertiary enrollment ratio to somewhere 30 in the next few years should be interested in what happens in our universities, especially the welfare of the lecturers that impart knowledge. And if they are not doing that and the lecturers are on strike, they should be the first people to find ways and means to talk to the lecturers, to make concessions so that these people will go back to the classroom. Right. They hold the key to this particular problem, and I will keep saying that. And until they realize that they hold the key to this problem, we are not going to find solutions to it. I also need to add that
we haven't seen instances of strikes in most universities across the world, where we know top universities in UK, US, South Africa, and even some African countries where lecturers had to lay down their tools. What are they doing that is different from ours at this point in time?
I think it's all about building faith between the two people. I mean, the employer and the employee. I think it's about developing goodwill. I think it's about making concessions. I think it's about respecting each other. And when that happens, you agree with me that it's been a long time that you saw UTAG going on such a strike. In fact, the stability of our tertiary education system is one of the reasons why you see a lot of other people from our neighboring countries coming to Ghana to have their tertiary that is one of the reasons.
Okay, Mr. Peter Anti is the Executive Director of IFEST, and we'll still have him on Zoom and talk to us to this issue.
Can you hear me?
Okay, you're back. All right, we can hear you. So go ahead, sir.
So I was talking about the stability of our university education system. Okay. That is why most of our friends in the neighboring countries now trooping to Ghana to seek for their university education in Ghana. So if we are not careful, we are going to lose that. And that is why we think that the ministry and government in general, I think by this time, the president should step in, because the vice president came in last year and we're still where we are. So I think the president should step in at this time and give words of assurance to the university teachers. I know that when the president steps in, the university teachers will listen and then they will go back to the classroom. So we are calling on the president to step in at this time and ensure that this dragging between the NLC, the Ministry of Education, and the university teachers is brought to an end. The president needs to step in at this time.
What can be said for both parties to agree or come to a compromise? Because it appears it has been overly dragged concerning both parties and their demands going forward. But you made a very interesting point that the educational ministry should propose a time frame where both can come to a stalemate in terms of what they have to do to bring conclusion to this whole matter.
What I'm trying to say is that we've seen this thing happening for a period of time. We've not seen any end in sight. In fact, people are calling for the closure of the universities. Okay, and the very moment the universities are closed, that would be a very serious matter, because then there will be a disruption of the academic calendar and all other challenges that comes with it. So if the Ministry of Education have been served with the proposals from the UTAG, what they need to do is also to have their discussions and make a counter proposal. That's the point I'm trying to make. I'm also saying that at this stage, the vice president came in last year and we are still where we are. So the next most powerful person is the president. And if education is very dear to the president's heart, as we know, as he's introducing measures in the education sector, in fact, as he's aiming that tertiary education enrollment ratio would increase to a higher level, I think it is time that the president steps in. I think there should be a meeting between the president and the executives of the University Teachers Association. I'm saying this because UTAG have met the Minister of Education, I think 2 times or more, and they've not been able to reach a compromise. So it means that.
Okay, we'll come back, Mr. Peter. We'll come back to you shortly. Still stay on. Let's go to Divine, who is with the African Education Watch. They are calling for the schools to be shut down for it's been overdue concerning the number of times or how long it's taken for this issue to be resolved. So, welcome back, Divine.
All right, thank you.
Good. So why are you making this call, and give us reasons that you believe needs to be followed going forward?
All right. Before I come to that, a quick one on a point by Peter. Now the president steps in and maybe a word of assurance from him would have settled this. For me, I believe strongly that where we have reached, to the point that UTAG is saying they are ready to even go to jail on all this, is that pointing to the extent that they can go far just to get an agreement with government. And therefore, a word of assurance is not what they need at this point, even if it is coming from presidents. What they need right now is to come to an agreement with government. And that is what government also needs to pursue. So that at the end of the day, we don't see reoccurrence. If the president comes today and gives word of assurance after meeting UTAG, and after months, and then UTAG says, okay, even president has not fulfilled his words, it tells you that we are coming to see another strike again. So right now, we should just use this particular time to have a resolution to this particular problem. And the point remains that UTAG has made a demand. Government should come out with its own. If you can't meet the entirety of what UTAG is demanding, if it has to meet UTAG halfway, both of you should speak on this issue. The power has been given to NLSC to negotiate on behalf of government. We have to see our institutions functioning. Not necessarily that we should wait for vice president even to step in before institutions do their work, or president coming in to speak before institutions can settle labor issue. NLC must be able to adapt or re-strategize their negotiation strategies so that we don't see this, especially running to court to compel striking unions to go to work. It won't help. It won't help. Now, back to your question about the call for closure of schools. Yes, of course, we've seen that for 5 weeks now that this strike has been ongoing. Students have also been in school for at least about 3 weeks now. And especially freshers, they have been affected. We know for continuing students, most of them probably may even have left home. But freshers, they don't want to go home because they don't know whether this strike will last long or it will be called off very soon. So they are in dilemma. There is no academic direction for these fresh year students. The special fresh.
Okay, we'll still come back to Divine shortly. He is of the view that indeed Okay, I think Divine is back. Divine, if you're here, continue.
Can I move on?
Certainly.
All right. So I was making a point about closure of school, the university schools, public one, of course. And that at this point, considering the level 100 students, especially who have resumed school, and there hasn't been orientation in most of these public universities, there has been no academic direction. They don't know what is going on there. So they are just there incurring costs, financial costs. They are feeding, they are doing all sorts of things. And if they are home, probably with their parents, they may not be incurring this cost. So it is just prudent that, okay, when there's no activity, academic activity ongoing, these students are allowed to go home so that when they know that there has been a compromise on both sides, they can be asked to come back to school. You know, I will believe also that not only the financial cost, but the social cost. You look at an instance in Eugene about a week ago, where a particular student, a level 100 student, was drawn in swimming pool. Strongly, I believe that if there were to be an academic activity, probably even though it was a Saturday, that student may have been doing an academic work, probably an assignment or a project that would have engaged that student and not necessarily being going there to swim. So instances like this tells you that there's a need for government to review, or especially the vice chancellors, to review this particular academic and say, okay, at this point, we need not to keep our students in school. And more especially, it is to send signal to government. Because when government won't want to cease the schools closing, no, it will be a dent on government's credibility. So governments will not want to see the schools closed. So if there's a push by UTAG and then university vice chancellors to close down the school, we believe it will also be a tool, a strategy to compel government to come to the negotiating table with something in hand.
Yeah. In a worst case scenario where this particular strike, let's say there is no disagreement between NLC and UTAG, what happens to students? What happens to educational structure, especially in the tertiary level?
I don't get your question right.
What happens to educational structure should both parties decide not to come to a compromise? In a worst case
what
scenario.
it means is that we are going to see more disruption to the academic calendar at the tertiary level. Already COVID-19 has wreaked havoc on our educational institution. We've seen universities students being in the house for several months before school was reopened. And that particular learning is constant.
All right. I think we'll be getting Divine still on this conversation. The impasse between government and NLC is still going on, but we'll be taking a break. When we come back, the discussion still continues right here on Good Afternoon, Ghana. Good afternoon, Ghana, here on Metro TV, and we are still on the industrial strike by UTAG, and conversely, we've seen that this has affected educational structure. They are caused by the Africa Watch Educational Watch for the schools to really look at their own academic calendar. And also, we spoke to Divine of the African Educational Watch, who suggested that indeed, there are demands by UTAG, but government should look at bringing the conversation down to ensure that the impasse is really resolved. Going forward. So, Divine, welcome back to Good Afternoon, Ghana. Now, with what we started, we're looking at the conversation going forward with regards to what the students will have to endure should both parties not come to a compromise. But we have seen a very dear academic calendar going forward. Last year, because of COVID, we saw the implication of what affected us. Are we to see that going forward with the fact that there could be another wave of COVID-19 going forward?
Yeah, that's right. There's another form. Once there's a closure of school, we could say that what affected students last year is academic works were disrupted. We're going to see something like this. And that's why we are more particularly calling for the fact that we don't even get to that particular point. It's because we are still not recovering from the effects of COVID-19 on teaching and learning arts across all levels of our academic calendar. And therefore, it's very important for government to come to a compromise with the teacher unions. Because a lot of, I believe probably there could be, these are options that the university may be taking, that, okay, at the end of the day, if we close down and students come back to school, if we still have to maintain the same academic calendar, if the strike is called off, it means that lessons would have been compacted and students would have been rushed through a lot of lesson activities. Or probably if they want to prolong the academic calendar after the strike is over, it tells you that it's going to incur more cost for students, and then we are going to travel beyond the academic calendar that the university currently have. So it's very important that we resolve this issue, that we don't see a long and a protracted back and forth with teacher unions, and then as far as UTAG is concerned, and then the NLC. So for me, I believe strongly, government, whatever, this is the opportunity for government to solve this. There's no need for government to be giving its words to the teacher unions or the UTAG, say, okay, we'll do it. No, this is not a point to be giving words. This is a time to come to the table with something and try to reach agreement with them.
So what do you make of a total review of our labor structure from the basic level to the senior high school level to even the tertiary level with regards to the teachers? Because the demands keep coming up every year. Government will have to review its labor budgeted amount, and will continuously be facing this challenge every budgetary year. What will you propose going forward? Divine. Okay. I think we'll be getting Divine back. I would like to go through once again.
Hello?
Okay. Divine, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you also hear me?
Okay, I can hear you clearly.
All right.
What I was saying earlier has to do with the number of years from the basic level to the senior high school level to even the tertiary level. We've seen labor dispute concerning the demands by the teachers who consistently have been calling for certain structures in their salary, or it has to do even the conditions of service. What do you think we can do to basically eliminate disputes, or let's say these particular challenges with labor and how much they have to be paid to ensure they have a better condition of service going forward?
All right. Already the structure is there. What is necessary is for government to keep up to its own structure. When we come to the basic school level, for instance, government has a collective agreement with teachers as far as the three teacher unions representing teachers are concerned. There's a collective agreement, and in there, government spells out in collaboration with the teacher unions what the condition of services are, and they have all agreed. The challenge now is for government to keep to its own side of the agreement. So if there are a lot of allowances, for instance, that are spelled out, if you read the collective agreement for the teachers as far as pre-tertiary institution level is concerned, there are a lot of allowances that they are supposed to get. And also look at teachers in the private area, teachers going on transfer, and all sorts of things. There are extra duty allowance. They are all there, but the reality is that this money, they don't come, or they delay in coming, or they are very inadequate if the government intends to release the fund finally. This is what is happening. We are still having backlog of salaries that have not been paid teachers. Recently, we heard of a court ruling where the court directed that some vehicles of GS be sold to pay some teachers who litigated against them for non-payment of their arrears. These issues are there. So it tells you that we don't need a fresh look at the whole structure as far as payment for teachers is concerned. What we need is that government tries its best to maintain the agreement that it has with the teacher unions, all the teachers. That is what is very important. But when we have things on paper and then government keeps accruing arrears as far as teacher salary is concerned, it doesn't help. It doesn't endanger trust in the whole process. If you don't do this, and then they are sending signals of pending a strike, and then you are also not trying to meet them halfway or even fully, and you allow them to go on strike, and then you use the corporate.
Okay, let me see. Let's look at it from this angle and see. What if we know as a country, economically, we have observed that our revenue collection isn't much, but in as much as this demand seems legitimate, we know we don't have enough revenue to shortchange certain capital project going forward? And also, with this labor front and persistency from the UTAG, what if we don't have money? Possibly government has not budgeted for instances like this. What could be happen in going forward?
You see, you don't tell workers that you don't have money when they see your actions and inaction suggesting that there's money in the system. We look at the waste in the system. We look at instances of waste across all levels. The kind of expenditure government incurs, some of them could be cut down. When we look at all this and you show that, okay, you are spending on things, frivolous activities in code to say, but at the end of the day, you are asking some people to tighten their belt, as we heard at the beginning of last year, that we should tighten our belt. But your actions are not suggesting otherwise. It doesn't help. You can't tell them that, okay, we don't have money in the coffers. We don't have money in the coffers, but serious in time, we are hearing of presidential jets. And then the hiring of presidential is not an issue of saying you don't have money. We don't have money, but a president traveling in V8 with convoys or even ministers, several convoys following them. This action cannot tell the workers that we don't have money. You see, so there's a need for government, if there's no money, at least for what we are considering right now, the strike by UTAG, you to come out with something.
But Divine, as you're saying, presidential jet and also some could classify them as administrative duty or functional demands. What do you say on that?
I'm not against that, but what I'm saying that we have an official jet for president. Whatever the reason is, we have seen president not using it. But that is not the issue. What I'm just trying to make is that if you are telling workers that there is no money, the meat is down to the bone, and therefore they should tighten their belts. But we see instances of you suggesting that, look, you are not managing our resources wisely, in quote. You can't tell them that, okay, just be there and then you tighten your belts and then we continue to spend like this. No, there's a need for you to spend prudently so that at the end of the day, the people can also see that what the little resources we are having, you are managing it so well. And if you ask them now to tighten their belts, or if you come out with something, they can see eye to eye with you.
As for what you said, I really would like more clarification, but we'll still look at what has to do with the position by the labor union, for instance, the NLC. What do you look forward to from the NLC? Because you initially made mention of the fact that they really have to open up the conversation. And now that we are not sure of the key details from the Labor Commission in regards to how much will best be appropriate or what should be done going forward, what would you propose?
What needs to be done right now is for government, especially NLC, to come to the point and the realization that you can't use strike to compel workers to go and be working. Of course, if it could be legitimate if you do, but that is not the best strategy to resolve issues or indifferences at the labor front. That is not the best strategy. What they need right now is to have a clear engagement with these people. And what actually is government also bringing? But when the NLC assume a posture that I am more on the side of government, then you are not bringing trust into the process, because actions and inactions of yours, I say, okay, once the unions are bringing their grievances, I am going to use a strategy that to compel them, and then you are not ready to bring the other side, which is the government side, to the table and come to a compromise. It doesn't help. So going forward, within this period, I think they are giving next week, Thursday, that is where the next convening will have been done. I believe that by next convening, even beyond that time, before that time, processing must be going underway. There must be something going underway so that before next week, Thursday, when they get to the negotiation table, it should have been easier. It is our hope that we don't see this issue traveling beyond next Thursday because of its academic implication on the students.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Divine Akpe. Abdullah Akpe is with the African Education Watch. for your time here on Good Afternoon Ghana. Now let's take some final reaction from Peter Partey Auntie. Peter, okay. We've heard from the Africa Watch, who initially was of the view that we should allow the NLC to function as a body and not allow the government, for instance, like you proposed earlier, the government should step in and give a clear direction, or let's say an assurance to UTAG with regards to this particular situation. What do you say? Do you still stand by that?
Yes, I said that the president, the government is working around this thing. The minister have met UTAG. Vice President my call is that the president should step in, should meet the leadership of UTAG and give them an assurance. You see, the point is that I agree, times are hard. There might be challenges with maybe meeting the demands of UTAG. In fact, even government might not want to commit himself to or itself to any kind of proposals. But when the first gentleman of the land sits with the leadership of the university teachers and assures them that there can be other ways out of this and that they should return to the classroom once he ensured that the other ways are adhered to, I think that we will be able to see an end to this. Other than that, the posture of government, I don't think is going to change. I mean, the posture of the ministry will not change. If they would, they would have stopped this thing long ago. And that's why I'm calling on the president, His Excellency, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, to step in and make sure that the lecturers return to the lecture rooms and academic work on campus resumes as early as possible. Other issues can be looked at. It's not always that you would have to get money to be able to ensure that some of these actions are brought to an end. The way you talk to the people, the assurances that you give them, the value of the assurances that you are giving would also mean a lot to those people who are carrying on an industrial strike. So I still maintain that the president of the Republic of Ghana should step in and meet the leadership of the University Teachers Association. And whatever discussion that he would have with them, I think that they would listen to him with respect, and then they will call off the strike. Then other kinds of negotiations and background interventions can be carried out. We need the schools to be reopened as early as possible.
All right. Peter Partey Auntie, we would like to get your final word before we go.
Yeah, so we think that the students' leadership, they are not doing well for their various members. This issue came, I'm told that they said they are doing background negotiations and other things. In fact, the ministry itself have not been able to handle these background negotiations with UTAG, how much more the students' unions. So I think that they should have also piled a lot of pressure on the government to ensure that these issues are resolved. So I call on the student leaders to also try and, as much as possible, to up their game and do whatever necessary they need to do in order that the government will listen.
Not just cutting you, but what form of pressure do you think? What form of pressure should that be? Okay.
Releases.
All right, Peter Partey, if you could hear
us. Go on a demonstration. They should embark on a demonstration. That is what I'm talking about. The student leaders should hit the street. If they do that for once, twice, 3 times, government would feel the pressure. At the same time, we are calling on the president of the Republic of Ghana to meet the leadership of UTAG and make sure that this strike action do not travel beyond next week. It's not good for the tertiary education system in Ghana.
All right. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Peter Partey's Auntie is the Executive Director with the IFEST. Thank you for your time. And also we're joined earlier by Divine Kwe, who is with the African Education Watch, who joined us earlier on this conversation. We touched on the UTAG industrial strike. But let me announce before we go, Bobby Ansah of Accra FM has been granted bail at the Kaneshi Court a few minutes ago. We'll still be following up on that development and bring you subsequently in our bulletins on Newsnight and also Newsflash. My name is Winston Tackie. This has been Good Afternoon Ghana here on Metro News. Stay tuned for more programs here on Metro TV. Have a wonderful afternoon.